My name is Bruce Anderson, and welcome to this Trust Talk about Trust and Your Ethics program. I'm HealthNet's Chief Ethics Officer. The short video will cover the main aspects of a typical organizational ethics program with a special focus on trust. In this presentation, I will use the metaphor of driving a car, where the car is your ethics program and the fuel for your car is trust. My perspective that I will present to you is that your organization needs an ethics program to keep trust healthy among all of your people. At the same time, without trust, you will not have an effective ethics program. Discussion of business and organizational ethics can be very abstract and cerebral, so I'm going to use metaphors and similes to help ground the material in everyday work life. My discussion of trust is grounded in research about organizations and business. We will start by reviewing a few key concepts of business, organizations, and ethics to establish the environment or the landscape in which we are working. Next, we will discuss the elements of an ethics program, which I am referring to as the vehicle. Next, we will examine the fuel that powers your program. We will spend time reviewing the aspects of trust needed to keep your car in motion. So let's get started by discussing the landscape we will drive our car through. This slide has important words and ethics concepts that inform any business or organization's ethics program. So let's review each of them briefly, starting with values. When I conduct a new hire orientation session, I always ask people for words they associate with ethics. Generally, I always give values like honesty, integrity, transparency. Everyone has a complex set of values that drive our decisions and behaviors all day long. But usually, we do not think about these values, but use them unconsciously to react to situations. Trust springs from values, and we will go more in depth regarding that in a moment. Organizations are complex, diverse animals. Today's employee base is diverse in terms of education, ethnic, and religious backgrounds. Customers are likewise diverse, making an ethics program interesting because there is no one-size-fits-all answer. We will discuss this in more detail later. Diversity is always interesting, but breeds conflict. In our context for today, diversity means people will have value conflicts. In fact, the research shows that all of us have value conflicts all day long. Many of these are small, and we make reflexive decisions, for example, about whether to speak up or not. Often people think that at work they may encounter the rare ethical dilemma, but my position is that all value conflicts have the potential to be an ethical dilemma. In the following slide, I will discuss more detail about ethics, but here I want to contrast ethics against values. Ethics is a system. When we make snap value decisions, we are not spending time to apply a system of questions against that situation. While values are included in ethics, ethics is the system we use to approach how we will determine, hopefully, the best course of action given the variables at hand. Ethics goes beyond the law. For those in highly regulated industries, I believe our best approach towards laws and regulations is that they are all good. If there is a bad regulation, then work through the proper channels to change it. Otherwise, it's there for the common good, even if it may have some unintended consequences. In my discussion of values, I mentioned the challenge of diversity and that diversity breeds conflict. How do we gain common ground when people may have a personal code that has strong judgments about a fellow team member? This is where your organization's code of conduct can help you achieve acceptance and a way forward. Even faith-based organizations have to deal with this because their workforce and the people they serve are most likely not uniform and may not even share the same faith. This is just a quick example to point out the difficulty. This definition is taken from a work by Chris MacDonald, PhD, who teaches at Ryerson University in Toronto. Dr. MacDonald is emphasizing that ethics is a model, an approach, a system. It's rule-based. It's an external framework that provides discipline in analysis and behavior. It gives guidance when the way forward is not clear or there are competing values or interests with uncertain outcomes. This discipline exists to restrain self-interest or profits when our actions affect others. An ethics program appeals to the higher level of the overarching and long-term mission of an organization and takes into account the needs and rights of all people and organizations that are affected. This makes ethics work so interesting because the constellation of issues is indeed unique in every situation. There is no cookie-cutter or simple recipe to guide us. Making blanket statements like, just do the right thing, without a disciplined approach is quite frankly irresponsible. Enough with theory. Now let's build our ethics car. In general, a typical ethics program will have 6 dimensions. As you look to increase trust among the people who are involved, these areas, well executed, will reinforce trust both inside and outside your organization or business. Many professions have standard codes of conduct that guide behavior. For example, defining conflicts of interest that are specific to their profession or industry. If possible, I recommend giving copies of your code, even if you use an industry code, to your employees or members of your organization at the point they enter, either as newly hired employees or new members of your organization. A framework to make ethical decisions is the engine of your program. Often this is included in your code of conduct. Sometimes it looks like a decision tree. Your framework needs to address the relationship between laws, regulations, and legal perspectives. Just because something is legal doesn't make it ethical. Ethical considerations need to involve everyone. What are the competing needs or rights of different parties? And lastly, your decision needs to stand up to public scrutiny. This doesn't mean your decision needs to be popular, but you have to be able to explain your decision in a way that demonstrates you understand multiple perspectives and the needs and rights of different parties. I like to consider training the wheels of our vehicle as it keeps us moving forward. Sometimes we tend to think of training as a discrete, single event, something we accomplish and are done with. But I'm coming ever more to the viewpoint that training is indeed lifelong, if not daily. The daily actions we take reinforce our beliefs, our habits, and help us travel through our lives, both our work and personal lives. The boundaries between those two are ever more disintegrating. More and more people find work to be integrated into lifestyle, which often means we are never off. Research also shows that when people receive even common messages of good behavior, the golden rule, for example, given before taking a test, they cheat less. Likewise, having a code of responsible practices that is reinforced not only from the top, but also from peers, lets everyone know that their actions set the tone for your organization. What is your expectation about receiving bad news? To increase trust among your organization, people need to know that they can report misconduct, seek guidance when they aren't sure, and that stepping forward is treated respectfully. Having a program that encourages speaking up sends the signal that you want to hear bad news, even if personalities or incentives might get in the way. This lifeline can keep trust alive in a difficult area you may not be aware of. Once someone steps forward, they will expect their allegation or report is treated with respect, given appropriate confidentiality, and that it will result in some action or communication back to them. I recommend dividing reports into high, medium, and low risk categories. For high and medium risks, you will want to follow a robust investigation program that delves into what happened, what should have happened, what was the role of management or someone in charge at the time of the incident, and what potential consequences exist based on this report. With more complicated allegations, you will find truth evolves. You may never reach a point where you can state positively what the ultimate objective truth is. However, you will need to reach a point of conclusion where it doesn't make sense to pursue the matter any further. The final aspect of an ethics program is justice, And the final point in building our metaphorical car is really about fairness. In general, people want to know that they will be treated fairly. Sometimes organizations make decisions that are not fair. For example, laying off positions, closing a plant, exiting a line of business. There's nothing fair about those examples, but how you make decisions, how you communicate the reasons behind these initiatives will go far to preserve trust among everyone involved. In cases of misconduct, fellow employees or members of your organization want to know, for example, that thieves receive punishment. If I'm fundraising for a charity where the executive director is using the money I raised to pay for her personal expenses, I want to know that due justice is served. Otherwise, I and almost everyone else will abandon even the worthiest charity. Now, I want to turn our attention to what I am calling the fuel of our program. This is based on Charles Feltman's The Thin Book of Trust. If you don't have it, I recommend you get it. For my work group, everyone has been trained in this, and we use it daily. If your employees or your members don't perceive you to be trustworthy, that you and your program don't take action, that your program engages in gossip or violates confidentiality, it will die an untimely death. So, let's examine the 4 components of trust in the workplace. Feltman's work rests on research, and I find it rock solid. So, what is trust? Choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. Whatever you choose to make vulnerable to the other's actions, you do so because you believe their actions will support it, or at the very least, will not harm it. Let's take a moment for that to sink in. We usually don't describe what trust is, and I find when people are confronted with this definition for the first time, it takes a moment to get the brain synapses to align. Let's read it again. Choosing to risk making something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. One of the first findings Feltman speaks about is research on how people view themselves on the trust meter and then how others view them. As you would guess, most people rate themselves as highly trustworthy. We also tend to rate others as less trustworthy than ourselves, and therefore others rate us as less trustworthy than our own estimation. So why is this? We'll explore this in the next few slides. The first dimension of trust is sincerity. Here are the 4 main elements of sincerity. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Okay, this hits directly to a frequent occurrence in business life where people are used to telling others what they think the other person wants to hear or that we want them to believe. Well, that's not very sincere, but this kind of political message is very frequent. You can enhance your sincerity by working hard to ensure you can be believed and taken seriously. And there is a natural and easy authority as you communicate that draws respect out of others. People will recognize your sincerity when your opinion is valid, useful, and is backed up by sound thinking and evidence. Proof points may be the easiest way to convey this. Research from years ago has shown that the greater determinants of successful communication are how you deliver the message. Yet, you need to both deliver the message in a believable way and back it up with sound principles that engages people. Make sure your actions align with your words. Despite my love of words, I know that my actions speak louder and have a more long-lasting impact. The next dimension of trust is reliability. While this sounds easy, in organizational life, this can be a challenge due to competing and shifting priorities. You meet the commitments you make. You keep your promises. Unclear or incomplete requests, offers, and commitments are often the source of unintended breaches of trust. Often in organizational life, there are dynamics beyond our control that prevent us from delivering our commitments as promised. This makes the car stall. The third element of trust is competence. Let's read what the 17th century French writer of aphorisms said about this. Often the desire to appear competent impedes our ability to become competent because we are more anxious to display our knowledge than to learn what we do not know. And we all thought this was new. Now, I'm going to guess this quote doesn't apply to anyone viewing this video, as you are investing in learning what you do not know by being here. So in general, competence means you have the requisite capacity, skill, knowledge, resources, and time to do a particular task or job. If people believe you don't, they will trust you less or not at all. The fourth and final element of trust is care. Care is the assessment you have the other person's interest in mind as well as your own when you make decisions and take actions. This is the most important element in building lasting trust, as without it, it will decay the other three dimensions. When others believe you hold their interests in mind, they will extend you their trust more broadly and not just situationally. Part of the challenge in trust and losing trust is that we all tend to make blanket statements like, I just don't trust that person. It may be that they are caring, sincere, and competent, but they come across as unreliable. So then you can develop a strategy to address that element of trust with another person. Or, should people view you as caring, sincere, and competent, but just unreliable, you can take specific actions to restore the perception of unreliability in their eyes and increase the trust they give you. I'll close with dignity. In addition to trust and creating and maintaining an ethics program that is trustworthy, I think the secret performance-boosting ingredient of your ethics program is dignity. And the path to dignity is found in truth-telling. 2 thoughts on truth-telling. 1, in normal, everyday discourse, truth-telling is actually our default setting. We usually tell the truth and generally expect people to tell us the truth. 2, the second is, it is generally wrong to lie. Okay, so we all tell little white lies and sometimes consciously lie to protect someone, and in some cases it is very much justified. But in the context of a business ethics program, approaching your coworkers with a strong sense of dignity, as shown by truth-telling, will advance your program in ways you cannot achieve otherwise. Thank you for attending this brief Trust Talk.